Welcome to the Ram Dass Fellowship live stream. It's Faster Than Fear, Cultivating an Unshakable Love. We're here tonight with Sharon Salzberg and Ram Dev, aka Dale Borglum. I'm Jackie Dobrinska. I'm the Education and Community Outreach Director of the Love Serve Remember Foundation and your host tonight. We're so happy that so many of you are joining us as we continue to create ways to build and deepen connection within the Ram Dass satsang. And community is so important, especially now. And spiritual community is where we find that place to feed our hearts and souls and to help us remember the deeper truths and practices, which can, often be easy to forget some days. It's also a place we come together to feed each other. Meister Eckhart said, God calls us to where our great gladness and the world's deep hunger meet. And all of us are hungry for something, and all of us have something to give. And we find those connections in community. So I invite you on whatever platform you're on to introduce yourself and say hi. Let us know where you're coming from. And before we begin, I just want to give you an outline of tonight. So Sharon and Dale will explore this idea of universal compassion and moving beyond struggle and into loving what was previously unlovable. They'll also lead us in meditations. The second half of our evening will ask you questions from the audience. So at any time, starting now until we end, you can type your questions into the chat function of whatever platform you're on. And the beloved Mangala and JR are behind the scenes helping us to bring those questions to us. And we'll try to answer as many as we can. So now I invite you to settle into your space, to take a moment to recognize that you are entering into satsang with hundreds of other people from around the world, a web of hearts and souls. Some of you might want to be intentional about creating this space and light a candle, but all of us can just simply feel our feet on the ground, invite the breath into our bellies and chests, and deepen into that loving presence that always resides in our hearts. And from that space together, we welcome Sharon Salzberg and Ram Dev. Both are exceptional human beings with incredible wisdom, hope, and brilliance to share. It's always a joy to talk with them. So Sharon was one of the first to bring meditation and mindfulness into American mainstream culture about 45 years ago. She's a meditation pioneer, world-renowned teacher, and industry leader who co-founded the Insight Meditation Society. She's also authored 11 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Real Happiness, and her newest book, Real Change, Mindfulness to Heal Ourselves and the World, an important read these days. Ram Dev has taught meditation since 1974 and gives workshops on the topics of meditation, healing, and caregiving as a spiritual practice. He authored Journey of Awakening, a meditator's guidebook with Ram Dass and others, and he is the co-founder and director of the Hanuman Foundation Dying Center. It's the first residential facility in the United States to support conscious dying. And he's the executive director of the Living Dying Project in San Francisco Bay Area since 1986 and in Santa Fe. So with that, let us all give a big welcome to Sharon and Ram Dev as we explore cultivating an unshakable love. Over to you, Ram Dev.
Thank you so much, Jackie, and it is a real pleasure to be here with so many people. Here we are a few days after the election, and I think for many of us, cultivating an unshakable love is a real priority right now. That love was fairly shakeable during the last few weeks and few months. So the title of what we're talking about is Faster Than Fear, Cultivating an Unshakable Love. And that first phrase, vaster than fear, the thing that's vaster than fear is the heart, is love. Maharaji would say, love is stronger than electricity. The only thing that's important is how much you love God. And in working with fear, as Jackie pointed out, I've been guiding people who are dying now for several decades. Many of these people are working with fear of death. And I found really two basic ways of working with fear. The first one is the devotional way. The first one is working with faith. When we were in India, Ram Dass came up with this slogan, fear, comma, no faith, faith, comma, no fear. If you're feeling fear in that moment, you're not having unshakable love. You're not having faith in God. And if you're feeling faith in that moment, there's no fear. So if fear arises, fear of how the election's going to turn out or what might happen after the election or what's happening with the pandemic in your community, can one deepen one's faith? And the question then arises is, what do you have faith in? Now, I have this great blessing that I was with Maharaji and Anandamai and the 16th Karmapa and all these beings who were such remarkable manifestations of pure love. But even still, it's hard to create unshakable faith. There's so much going on in the world, so much that we take as personal, people getting pandemic fatigue, if you will. So, in those moments where things begin to become shakable love, what do we have faith in? How can we deepen our faith? Suzuki Roshi, my first meditation teacher, said this wonderful thing. He said, the most important thing is finding the most important thing. And really, that motivation, that question, what's the most important thing, or even what do you have faith in? If we really ask that, if we really have that in the marrow of our bones, that you have faith in God, you have faith in the Dharma, you have faith in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you have faith in the Divine Mother, you have faith in your own true nature. To the extent we really have this living faith that is robust and that we can keep calling on when things become shakable, it carries us through so many different things. In Tantric Hinduism, all reality is seen as the mother. Uh, the sound of my voice, my body, your body, energy, space, everything that can be perceived, experienced is the mother. And can we then trust the mother? Can we really begin to see that all this is the face of the mother, not just, oh, great, Joe Biden won because I'm a Democrat, or oh, horrible thing, Joe Biden won because I'm not a Democrat, or your relationships with pandemic or whatever might be going on in your life. How much of this can we see as the mother? Uh, Maharaji really said that until you understand the mother, you can't become enlightened. As long as we're having this confrontational or judgmental relationship with experience, it's going to be very difficult to have a mind that's stable enough and a heart that's spacious enough. So in English, we say, I am afraid. Just the way we language things, it makes it so difficult to go beyond an emotion. In Spanish, we say, yo tengo miedo, I have fear. Much easier. In Tibetan, we say, fear is here. So to create this unshakable love, we have to begin to disidentify with these passing clouds of emotion. Emotions are all healing. Emotions all have a healing message. Anger, sadness, fear, they're all showing us the next step on our path. I remember Maharaji saying, I love sadness because it makes me feel closer to God. Most of us try to get away from sadness, find happiness. So in creating this devotional relationship with love, with fear, with our practice, it's really important to cultivate compassion, to be able to open our heart to the difficult, to the painful, as well as to the beautiful. Compassion has some defining qualities, and one of the defining qualities is a spacious heart, a heart that's big enough to include it all, and a heart that doesn't have a lot of I, me, mine running around in it. At the same time, a compassionate heart is connected. You're connected to yourself, you're connected to each other, you're connected to the Buddha, the deity, to God, whatever it is. So those qualities of connectedness, of spaciousness, we can keep asking ourselves in a hourly, daily way, am I feeling connected right now? Right now, as we're in this virtual room together, are we connected or are we getting lost in the narrative and thinking about things? The other path to the open heart is the more Buddhist path of going through the yanas, if you will, of mindfulness to compassion to realizing the empowered sacred nature of things. So I've developed a dance called the Tantric three-step, which is kind of like the country two-step, but it's a little different. Okay. And the first step is becoming mindful. We can't we can't create an unshakable love until we're mindful of what it is that's shaking the love. We can't find something that's vaster than fear until we're able to be in a mindful, embodied way with the fear. When we can be with fear in an embodied way, then the heart begins to open. We begin to have a naturally arising compassion, not even something that we're doing. It's our true nature, but it can be cultivated. So then the second step of the Tantric three step is realizing this spacious, connected, warm nature of the heart. As the heart is perceived as more and more vast and boundaryless, the sense of I, even though it remains as just one small little cloud in the vast sky of mind, it's not something right in our face all the time that we're trying to aggrandize and improve and protect ourselves, that we have a much more global relationship with humanity. And in fact, what I found right now in working with people who are having a very hard time with the pandemic is instead of taking care of yourself, once in a while do global practice, do practice for everybody who's being affected by the pandemic, everybody who's lost somebody, everybody whose presidential candidate just lost, or everybody whose presidential candidate just won. It's just as easy to get caught in pleasant emotions as it is in unpleasant emotions. So as this spaciousness increases, it is revealed that who we are is actually this face of God, that there's this tantric reality that in Tibetan Buddhism, there are these empowerments where after you've done enough mindfulness practice and compassion practice, you go into the Lama and he bops you on the head and gives you these visualizations and mantras where you are Chinrezi, the god of compassion. You are red Tara or green Tara or Mahakala. And in fact, we are. We don't have to go get bopped on the head, but we have to go through these initiations. So, two paths. I kind of use both of them. My main practice is some combination of devotion and embodied awareness. I'm very much a proponent of becoming embodied, of working with qualities like groundedness and centeredness. Many people in the West, particularly spiritual practitioners, tend to be disembodied. They're trying to meditate their troubles away. John Welwood called it spiritual bypassing. Is it possible to be grounded, to trust our connection with the earth? And this earth then is mother, it's mother image, it's what we trust, it's what is supporting us and nurturing us moment to moment to moment. So, what I'd like to do is guide a short meditation. I think I have about 10, 15 minutes to do that. I did lose track of the time. I was supposed to keep track of the time, and I got so excited about the Dharma, I forgot, which is how many fingers was that? 10, 10 fingers. Okay. Then two thumbs. Okay. Okay. So let's do a short guided meditation. There's going to be a lot of material. Just pick what works for you. But in the beginning, examine your motivation. What is it you really want in life? Going back to that Suzuki Roshi quote, what is the most important thing? Uh, Beyond politics, beyond personal safety, what is it? What is your heart's desire? What is the heart of your heart's desire? The fact that you're going to die, but you don't know when. How does that bring us into the moment? Is that some motivation that we might not survive my meditation? So going into motivation, and then I would ask you from that motivation to please invoke that which you trust. Buddha Dharma Sangha, the Mother, Maharaji, Hanuman. What is it that you trust beyond the rational mind? What is it that you trust beyond that which changes, that does not die? Can we bring our faith in that which we're invoking, that which does not change? Can we bring our faith to a level that allows us to allow the body and the mind continue to arise without needing to grasp, without needing to try to understand what it is that's going on, without turning meditation into a self-improvement project? Having enough faith that we can be with this moment in a very direct, naked, intimate way. Resting in your body, feeling your body on the seat, on the cushion, the movement of breath. And can you begin to notice, rather than just looking at the surface, there's a thought and there's a sensation and there's the sound of Dale's voice. Can you can you notice if there is some underlying background anxiety or fear that's creating agitation that keeps moving the mind, keeps moving the body? Can you begin to be with that underlying sense of restlessness, of wanting things to be a little different than exactly the way they are? Notice how that's creating a subtle sense of suffering. And can you then begin to open your heart, breathing directly into your chest as if there were nostrils in the center of your chest, and begin to have this spacious, connected relationship with your experience as it's arising? Keeping your heart open, being more interested in your relationship with the content of experience than the content itself. Is the heart connecting? Is the heart spacious? When you get disconnected, when you get contracted, notice that. Can you love even that? Can we have compassion for the places we're afraid? And in doing this, does the attachment to the notion of a separate I begin to relax and release and open a bit, and begin to reveal that no matter what the content is of our experience, that there is a sacred nature, there's an underlying wholeness to what it is that we're experiencing. Happy thought, sad thought, neutral thought, sensations in the body, perception, all these things changing. And in this openness, naturally rising compassion, a wish that all beings might be free from suffering, that all beings might be free. From this vast spaciousness, breathing into your body, feeling the breath, feeling a sense of groundedness, connection with the earth, still compassion for all beings, including yourself. It's often said that the most important part of a meditation session is right after the bell rings. Can we rest in this place of spaciousness while more material is being presented while we have a conversation? What is the most important thing? If we rest in that motivation, rest in that wanting to be, that sentence didn't turn out quite right. Not really wanting, but resting in that wholeness, then we don't get distracted by the narrative. We don't grasp at the thoughts. We don't grasp at sensation in the body. Can we begin to distinguish in a rather subtle way the difference between anxiety and uncertainty? This is a very uncertain time, maybe not as uncertain as before the election, but given the climate, given the pandemic, given the political divisiveness, there's a lot to be uncertain about. Can we find an unshakable love that allows us to stay open to the uncertainty without getting caught in anxiety? When Theodore Roosevelt said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, he was wrong. We don't have to fear the fear. We can be with the fear. There is a heart that is vaster than the fear. So at this point, I will pass the baton over to dear Sharon, and am really anxious to hear what you have to say, Sharon.
Well, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I was trying to remember when we were last together. It was a long time ago.
It was a very long time ago.
It was like in Santa Fe or something.
Yeah, and I was living in Santa Fe only in the 1980s.
Yeah, long time ago, but here you are. And thank you. That was really great. And so many thoughts came up in my mind. I'm just trying to see which thread to pull on first. I think I love the quotation from Suzuki Roshi. It reminded me very much of, well, first, these two stories I usually tell in juxtaposition, because I do believe in general we have like a motto, we have a theme, either conscious or half conscious or unconscious, that we are using, to say what gives our lives meaning, what they're about, what we're capable of, who we are, things like that. And the first story is about the founding of the Insight Meditation Society, which is next door to me through the forest in Barre, Massachusetts, when Jack Kornfield and Joseph Goldstein and I were looking for a retreat center, which was 1975. We ended up looking at this property, and it was a Catholic novitiate at the time, and we stood there and we just couldn't decide what to do. Joseph and I had been back from India and Jack from Thailand, just a very short time. And you remember, Ram Dev, how weird it was in those days to say you were a meditator or you were teaching meditation, and people would kind of go, oh, that's so strange. And so we looked at this place, which seemed perfect for a retreat center. It's very placid. It's very quiet. But on the other hand, it seemed really big, and we had no idea how many people at all in this country would be interested in learning meditation or this form of meditation. So we went to downtown Barre for lunch to try to figure it out. And Barre's this very traditional New England town with a town green on it, in the center of it. And in those days, on the town green, there was a monument which had engraved upon it the Barre town motto, which is tranquil and alert. So we took a look at that and we said, okay, that's an omen. Any town that has a motto like tranquil and alert should have a meditation center in it, because we use those terms all the time in terms of, in meditation, we deepen tranquility and calm and peace, but we also strengthen alertness and aliveness and interest and so on. So we went ahead and did it. So the place that we bought, as I said, was a novitiate that had been built in stages. And the first part, the the main building was a private home. It was a mansion that was built by someone named Colonel Gaston, who at one point was Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts. And it said that Colonel Gaston also had a motto that he tried to live by, which went, "You should live every day so you can look any damn man in the eye and tell him to go to hell." So I looked at that. It was like this volume about the history of Barry. And I thought, my first thought was, I wonder how well he was getting along with his neighbors, who perhaps were trying to go around being tranquil and alert. But I'm really struck by, just as I was really struck by that quotation from Suzuki Roshi, I think we really do have a kind of motto. And when it's partly conscious, or even more than partly, make it more conscious. And sometimes we need to actually expand it. We need to stretch it, because our sense of what our life is about might be really small and constricted in an artificial way. You know, just a sense of limitation that is just a construct. It's the story we've been told about who we are, and that we tend to believe and incorporate. And so that was the first thing that came up in my mind. And for many people, that story, once expanded, once opened, has to do with love. And we were talking before we actually got online here. I mean, the term unshakable love is a little bit, I don't know, maybe overly idealistic, in the sense that I think, short of, being like a new Curly Baba or an Undamima or being like that, I think what happens is that we get unshakable, hopefully, or unwavering North Stars that we navigate our lives by. We may not always live up to that, certainly not, but we so deeply know something is true that it's not a question of debate or convincing and something like that, which brought me to also listening to Ram Dev. I was thinking about, within, say, the Burmese Buddhist description of faith, it has different aspects or different levels, you could say. It's not faith in the sense we might use it as a term in the West that has to do with belief or doctrine or adherence to dogma. It's not like a commodity where you either have enough or the right kind, or you're condemned. It's not like that. It has to do with being able to offer your heart. It has to do with breathing life into something instead of standing in the distance, thinking, gee, it would be nice to learn how to meditate. I think I'll buy a book on it for my cousin. That would help them. It's like, it's trying it. It's moving toward the center of possibility right there. That's what faith is. It's a very different sense. And there are different levels to it. The first level that they describe is what they call bright faith, which is this very beautiful state. It's like we're stuck, we're confined. The images of being in a room with the door shut, and suddenly the door swings open, and you go, oh. It's like we're inspired, we meet a person, we see some art, we hear music, something happens, so that we realize life is bigger. I don't even know what's on the other side, but it's so much bigger than I had imagined. And it's a beautiful state. It's likened to falling in love. And I honestly think the best description I've heard of it came from Bruce Springsteen, who wrote a letter that's in Cleveland in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He wrote it upon Bob Dylan's induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and he talked about in the letter the first time he heard Bob Dylan's music. And he was maybe 15 years old or something like that. He was riding in a car with his mother, and a song by Bob Dylan, singing it, came on the radio. And the way Bruce Springsteen described it was, he said, it's like a giant boot came down and kicked open the door of my mind. And then he said, and then my mother said, that man can't sing. So it's interesting. Like, not everything inspires everybody in the same way, but sometimes we have these moments where it's just like, wow, look at that. But that's considered also a very vulnerable state, because it's not totally grounded in our own vision of what's true. It's usually proximity to someone else or something else. And so there's a process, there's practice, there's deepening, there's questioning, there's wondering, there's really demanding to know for oneself. There's a whole movement, so that we're not just taking it as true because someone else has said it. Or, the risky part of that kind of intoxicating falling in love feeling is that we don't want to threaten what seems to be the proximity to the source of that great feeling. And so we don't want to ask questions. We don't want to, express our doubts. And that's not a good state. We have to be able to question and wonder and really see for ourselves more what's true. And if we can do that, then that original state of bright faith moves on to what's called verified faith. And where it is, it's like grounded in our own experience. And that deepens so that it moves on to something that is called unwavering faith. And that's the place that I think that unshakable love comes in. It's not that one necessarily perfectly embodies all the time the thing we know so deeply to be true, but we know it so deeply to be true. And I think in this sense of one of the quotations from the Buddha that I've always found kind of quirky, where he said, and later was echoed by Martin Luther King Jr., many centuries later, where the Buddha said, hatred will never cease by hatred. Hatred will only cease by love. This is an eternal law. Hatred will never cease by hatred. Hatred will only cease by love. This is an eternal law. And the reason I find it quirky is because the Buddha is so famous for talking about impermanence constantly. And then to say, this is an eternal law. And I actually believe it. And I know it's not always comfortable. And it would be so much easier in so many situations to hate in return. But there's something in me that actually finds it irrefutable. So that is like the unshakable part. I think we have to really parse that out and see what it might mean when we're not so perfect. We can still have that North Star. That is the story that we have verified and that we believe and that we live our lives by. So when we blow it and we lose it, we come back to that. We don't come back to a real pondering. Maybe it's not true in this situation. This one's really different. We have known it so much from our own seeing. So that's where I went, in hearing Ram Dev's beautiful presentation. And in meditative practice, clearly there's so many different approaches and styles. Learning not to be so afraid of what we're feeling is really important, which is both not being afraid of the painful states and also not being afraid of the beautiful and wonderful states. There are plenty of times where we don't let those in very much. We feel too guilty, we shouldn't have it, or, it's not as good as we thought it was going to be, like someone else has it better, or whatever. Some distortion of that relationship. And so it's really learning how to let everything happen. And then there are other practices which are specifically around what I call a stretch. It's realizing we have certain ruts of attention, certain habitual ways of forgetting. And if we are willing to pay attention differently, then what is elicited is a quality of loving kindness. So by loving kindness, I mean a profound sense of connection. Not liking somebody, not approving of them, not giving in to their agenda if we really believe it's wrong or harmful. But it's this profound knowing our lives have something to do with one another, that we really live in an interconnected universe. And this is not a sentimental or gooey kind of process of thinking. This is really about seeing things the way that they are, because it's true. And if anything, somebody sent me a quotation of myself from like 10 years ago or something, and which is always an interesting experience. And in it, I said what I am still saying all the time, which is that so many things bring us to this understanding that science brings us here, economics brings us here, environmental consciousness certainly brings us here, that what happens over there doesn't nicely stay over there. It affects us over here, and what we do, it matters, because where we put our energy will also filter out along these lines of interconnection. And then I went on to say, even epidemiology brings us here, because as Ram Dev knows, we have good friends who are epidemiologists we've known since our time in India. And so I always used to say that. People used to say to me, what are you talking about? What's that? What does that mean? I don't know what that means. Why are you saying that? And it's like, well, here we are. Our lives are interconnected, and the heart's response to that is a recognition. And that's what we call loving kindness. It's just very important to understand it doesn't mean some gooey state. Its power comes from reflecting that truth. And we stretch. We look at ourselves maybe a little differently than we ordinarily do, so that we can have some loving kindness for ourselves. Instead of going through the list of our faults one more time, we bring different beings, people, animal to mind. Maybe somebody who's done a lot for us, but we don't generally think of them much in gratitude. So what happens when we bring them to mind and we actually do that? Or the kind of person we normally overlook, like the checkout person in the supermarket, perhaps, if we still overlook them, I don't know. And we might look right through. So what happens when we look at them and spend a moment wishing them well? So that's really the practice we're going to do together. Okay? So let's sit together. You can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not. In this practice, we silently repeat certain phrases, which are the expressions of the heart. It's the way we're paying attention differently. And the phrases are gift-giving, they're offering. It's like a blessing. We offer these phrases and all the energy that goes with that to ourselves, to others, and finally to all beings everywhere, all of life. Common phrases are things like, may I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Live with ease means in the things of day-to-day life, like livelihood and family, may it not be such a struggle. May I live with ease. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. People always say to me, who am I asking? And I say, well, you're not asking anybody anything. It's gift-giving. It's generosity. It's that offering. It's like handing someone a birthday card and say, may you have a great year. May you be safe. May I be safe. And you don't have to struggle to try to have a special feeling or emotion come up. Just whatever happens as you collect your attention behind one phrase at a time. And when your mind wanders, you get lost in thought, or you fall asleep, truly don't worry about it. See if you can just let go and return. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And let's see if someone comes to mind who's like a benefactor for you, someone who's helped you. Maybe they've helped you directly. They've helped pick you up when you've fallen down, or maybe you've never met them. They've inspired you from afar. The texts say this is the one whom when you think of them, you smile. Could be an adult, could be a child, could be a pet. Who makes you smile? So if someone like that comes to mind, you can bring them here. Get an image of them or say their name to yourself. Get a feeling for their presence and offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. Even if the words aren't perfect, they're carrying the heart's energy, so they're serving us. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And let's bring somebody that you know who maybe is having a very difficult time right now. They feel alone, they feel afraid, or they're sick. They're disappointed. Just see who comes to mind. And bring them here. Then see what happens as you offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. And let's have a group. Let's just see who comes to mind. Friends, family, colleagues, puppies, whoever. And we'll offer loving kindness to the collective. May you be safe. Be happy. Be healthy. Live with ease. And then all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown. May all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation. So thank you for that. All beings, thank you for that.
Thank you, Sharon.
And it's funny, Ram Dev, when you said you've heard that the moment after we end the meditation is the most important moment. I thought, oh, I had a teacher once who said the most important moment in your meditation is the moment you sit down to do it. So I think we've got it bookended there. What happens in the middle is just what happens in the middle, you know. It's always different. So I want to ask you actually about the Living Dying Project and the kinds of work you do and the people you work with. There have been so many times when I've just been teaching about something and somebody will say they learned that point when they were a hospice volunteer, when the outcome you want isn't the outcome you're going to get, you know, that both in terms of somebody living perhaps or just the being able to control the manner of their death, and how profound an experience that has been for everyone. And I'll also say that I have rarely seen as much radiance and joy as in that group of people, which is very intriguing because it flies in the face of a certain kind of conditioning, you know, like, oh, that's going to make me happy.
Well, in some ways, many of the most beautiful Americans I've ever met are people who are almost dead, as you're suggesting, and I think that's really because with the right kind of background, the right kind of support, that one can go beyond identification toward the end of life with that which does suffer, that which does die, and begin to rest more fully in the wholeness. I remember being with Maharaji, and he would love everybody equally. It was not dependent on personality qualities or bodily qualities. It was just the essential nature. And if someone is dying gradually with a degenerative disease like cancer, say, they can be really frustrated that they're not who they used to be, and they still can't play basketball or read chili rellenos or go to the bathroom by themselves. Or they can feel I'm being whittled away now to my essential nature, that even though I miss those things, I'm beginning to see who I really am. And even being with people who are in a great deal of physical pain, who are in a joyful, almost ecstatic state, because even the pain in the body is showing them that they're not just the body. There's something very much larger than that. So, as a recovering mathematician, I've got an equation. All fear equals fear of death, and fear of death equals lack of enlightenment. It's the place where we're caught in our separateness. So that I say pretty much the same thing, at a meditation retreat or a spiritual workshop as at a dying workshop. There are a few little tricks at the end of life, practices, attitudes, but most of it is who am I? What's going on here? What's the nature of reality? How can I work with the suffering in my life? And we live in a very third chakra, egocentric, power driven society. And being a male, I think I've even made a certain mistake in teaching from like a male perspective. And there's even the notion about cultivating an unshakable love. Another way to look at it would be receiving love that is inherently unshakable. We don't have to do anything to make it unshakable. It's there. And uh, that resting in spaciousness, resting in the loving nature of things, uh, going beyond the sense of I've got to accomplish something to get enlightened. I've got to get from point A to point B. So that I think being around dying people really reveals that need. And in fact, Trungpa Rinpoche said, until you come into intimate contact with death, your spiritual practice will have the quality of you being a dilettante. And I really think that there's no more powerful practice for this confusing time in which we live than a deep inner contemplative practice combined with an outer relationship with death. It doesn't mean you've got to be a hospice volunteer or spending all your time with dying people, but you're living a life where you're not denying death. You're opening to it when it arises. Uh, you and I are talking about things that happened back in the 70s, so that it's clear that our bodies are getting a little bit older and showing some signs of wear and tear. I would guess mine certainly is. And how do we react to that? Is that a frightening thing? Is it an embarrassing thing, or is it just the unfolding of our nature? The other thing I wanted to say, just one other point, when you were saying that thing about uh, those different levels of faith, that it kind of reminded me that I feel like a sandwich. That there's two pieces of bread and there's some stuff in the middle, and one piece of bread is an unshakable faith in God and the Dharma and Maharaji. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt you could hold a gun to my head, and I know it's absolutely true. If anything is absolutely true, unchangeably true. Uh, on the other end of it, on the other piece of bread, I can talk about it. I can be really articulate. I can let people think I know all this stuff. But in the middle, there's this meatloaf of neurosis that's got to be chewed on too sometimes, right? So that sometimes we're like resting in the unshakableness, and sometimes we're talking about it because we know it's true, even though we're not living there. But it's that dealing with the stuff in the middle that is the practice, of course. Kind of a strange metaphor, but that's the way it comes
No,
out.
I think it's very interesting. I've never heard that before.
That that's because I just made it up.
Well, then, can you imagine? You had that experience of being with Maharaji, which I'm assuming was the basis of that unshakable faith. Because you witnessed it, you saw the power of that love,
Yeah.
um, and clearly not everyone has that experience.
Well, at the same time, I'm so almost reluctant to talk about having a guru because some people think it's really gauche and other people get really jealous. I remember that summer at Naropa when Joseph and Jack were there. Were you there that summer? That
I
first?
was there for part of it. Yeah.
Okay. And Joseph came over to my house. Ram Dass was there. We were having a celebration for Hanuman's birthday or Guru Purnima or something like that. And Joseph said, Maharaji must have been a very great teacher because he has all the most difficult students. And uh, yeah, I had to drag my body to India and get hepatitis and malaria and almost get killed a few times. And I know the story about you that you told Munendra like beating off the beggar with the umbrella who was trying to grab your shoulder bag or something. It was not easy being there, but I was stubborn enough that I needed to go there. And I know a lot of younger people who are just as close to Maharaji as I am. They didn't have to do the whole buying a plane ticket to get to that place. But yeah, I mean, certainly being with him was great grace.
Yeah. Well, and, the same thing is true even in terms of just meditation practice, in that I had to go to India too. I was 18 years old. I grew up in New York City. I was in college in Buffalo, New York. I'd never even been to California when I went to India. But I had this burning desire to learn how to meditate, the real thing, not just read about it. And
Yeah.
I wanted to know how to do it. And I looked around Buffalo, New York. I didn't see it anywhere. And I created this independent study project for the university so I could go off to India my junior year. And I did. And I think about that, I think, oh my God, and clearly I wasn't the only one. And the intensity of the motivation was so strong for all of us to go all the way over there. And now you don't need that kind of intensity of motivation. You can pick up your phone,
like, you can buy the wisdom of the ages through Amazon. It shows up at your door a day or two later.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, are there any questions coming in, Jackie, from the audience at all?
Yeah, I'll ask. This one is from Christoph. It says, I listened to Ram Dass's Path of the Heart multiple times. I find myself stuck in the same issues as him. He wanted to be truthful and love everyone, but found that it was not easy. I find that the more I try to be truthful and love everyone, the more anger I have, and the less I end up loving myself. What would you recommend to do when the universe tries to shake my love?
Well, why don't I take that one, because I was actually there the day when Ram Dass came up to Maharaji and said, Maharaji, you tell me to be truthful and you tell me to love everybody. And the truth is I don't love everybody. I'm angry at everybody. And Maharaji said, drink some hot milk. That was that was his remedy. So Christoph's question really is for many of us, the work of a lifetime. I'm not sure there's a shortcut answer, that as long as our sense of self is identified with our separateness, and I'm here and you're there, and I need this, and maybe you bring it or you don't, that we're going to get angry at times when we're not fulfilled, when we're not satisfied. We all love ourselves. We all try to take care of ourselves. One way of looking at spiritual practice is that we expand the sense of self. So it's not just me, but it's the people close to me, and then eventually becomes everybody. And then who's there to be angry at? Are you angry at yourself? Well, you can do that, but it doesn't really feel very good.
Yeah, maybe I would just add, I think we have to, this goes back to the meditation actually that Ram Dev led. We have to allow ourselves the feelings that come up and not disparage them or put ourselves down or think I'm betraying, the great aspiration I have for my life. Because we feel what we feel. The question is, what are we doing with those feelings? Do we take them to heart? Do we let go of some? Do we hold them in a different way? Can we have some kindness toward ourselves if they're really entangling and sticky and painful? And, everything is about that relationship and not about judging what arises. And that's difficult, of course, but I have a cup. I don't have it with me, but people keep making me cups. Thank you very much, all my friends, with sayings that I use a lot in teaching, including we feel what we feel. But I don't have my we feel what we feel cup with me. But we feel what we feel. And we really need to forgive ourselves, whatever that feeling is, and not think, I should have been able to control it. I've been meditating for, 6 months or 50 years or something like that. It shouldn't be here.
Right.
But what are we doing with it? And that will be the basis of a whole other relationship.
Let me give you a quote from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He said, if you want other people to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. So imagine how simple and wonderful your life would be if your motivation for action were compassion. Not do they like me, Should I get angry because they're not doing what I want them to do? But what is the compassionate action, which includes me and the other person and really the whole universe? I mean, it's so simple, but it's so difficult because it's so simple that we can trust compassion. We can trust that spacious relationship. But there's this fundamental tension in spiritual practice be, between the fixated nature of the ego structure and the basically groundless nature of reality. And they're always bumping into each other. And how much do we trust the Dharma? How much do we have faith in? As we were talking about before, how much do we have faith in that we can have compassion for the place where we get angry? Is angry a bad thing? Do we need to judge ourselves for being angry? Usually, there is an implicit judgment that comes up with the question, I'm angry. What should I do about that? Just be angry. It's not the anger that's the problem. It's the identification with the anger, the resistance to the anger. Maharaji got angry all the time. He yelled at people. The Dalai Lama says he's got a hot temper.
Mm.
I got really angry at somebody just yesterday. Whole other story.
I'm curious if you find that these practices work through trauma as well, because feels like there's these personal and collective traumas that we hold in our body. And earlier we talked about disembodiment, and this idea that like hurt people, and in the trauma often there's anger and shutdown, and yet it can get us stuck in loops too. And so being with it, will it get it? I'm just curious about the loops that can happen with trauma. And the being with. Does that make sense, that question?
It makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you want to take the share, and I got a few things to say if you want.
Yeah, I mean, can you just say something more about the loops? What do you mean by loop?
I understand that part of a trauma brain is that they get caught in sort of loops, thinking loops.
Okay, it's like a fixated or obsessive thinking about something.
Yeah.
Implicit memory, where we're not even really relating to what's going on as an adult, but that something from childhood is completely conditioned and unconscious, and we think we're dealing with the present, but we're in this loop with our past is really hard to pay attention to. And there's been some really remarkable work done, both with using psychedelics, which we don't have to get into today, but by giving people a guided experience of non-duality. Yoga Nidra or Dzogchen or something, so that people who have been really traumatized are coming back from the war, they have PTSD or they have acute depression or something, and they're feeling hopeless and helpless, just having a short-term guided experience of their wholeness, even though they don't have the foundation to stay there, lets them know that they don't have to feel hopeless and helpless. They can begin to work with this now. And the whole process really begins to dramatically shift.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the kind of experience or this kind of situation where you really want a teacher, or you want a guide that is really experienced. And I think one of the ways you can note that experience is by a kind of flexibility. Somebody's not holding to like, we have to sit with eyes closed for 45 minutes. That's the way we do things. That's the only way to do things. That's ridiculous. If you think about the one of the underlying principles of any meditation practice is going to be balance. Right, because it's believed that when our system comes into a greater balance, the things we want will emerge, like a sense of connection or insight or clarity. So the work isn't to like grab out after a certain experience, but it's to work with that balance. And balance is always going to look different for everybody and any one of us at different times. And there's some times when we are like so far back from our experience and we need to like come forward and inhabit the experience, but that's like baby steps. That's not like a huge breakthrough all at once. It's like in and out. Right. And there are times when we are enveloped, we're overwhelmed, we're flooded, and the balance is going to look like getting a little space, getting centered. But that also is going to mean titrating. There's some other word in trauma therapy, I can't remember it right now, but it's basically titrating. It's like a little dose, and then you go someplace safer, you go someplace more easeful, in and out. And so I think there are lots of ways that one can utilize various tools of meditation, including this, yoga, movement, grounding exercises, all kinds of things that could be useful. But you need to feel you're not in a rigid situation, where the expectation is that there's a singular approach that's going to be right for everybody at all times.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful. I'm going to ask a few other questions. This is from Usha, who asks, when you are compassionate towards the self, but it hurts the other person, how do you handle it?
I really feel there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what compassion is in the West. That often people think it's being nice or kind. I'm not saying that's the foundation of this particular question, but for me, compassion is a state of being that includes myself and the person I'm relating to, the surrounding area, so that it's not something that I'm beaming compassion at the other person and not feeling compassion for myself, or as the question implies, I'm feeling compassion for myself and that's hurting the other being. That it's you're compassionate and you realize this particular action maybe will be good for me but hurt the other person. Maybe that's the compassionate thing. I mean, maybe we can't make everybody happy all of the time. And uh, to me, trust, my strategy in life is if I really feel in my heart, I trust my compassion. I trust to do anything, even if it's a strong, assertive response. And if I don't feel my heart completely, I fall back to being kind, just trusting the kindness as sort of like a bottom line, do no harm like a doctor, so to speak. Sharon, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, there are ways of parsing any action, and one of the ways it's talked about sometimes in like early Buddhist schools is and any action, anything we do, anything we say, anything we hold back from doing or saying, which is another kind of action, will have different elements to it. And the first is the intention or the motivation, which is like the heart space that's guiding the action. And that's considered very important, certainly like in Buddhist psychology, not so much in the West where it's really poo-pooed, like the road to hell is paved with good intentions, or what do you mean you had a good intention? You just completely screwed up. But in the East, the intention is like the energetic seed of the action, because it's like, I used this just earlier today as a prop. If I was to hand someone this candle, all anybody sees is my hand moving down, picking up an object and moving it forward. But the question might be like, what's motivating me? Maybe I'm giving it to you because I like you and I want you to have it. Or maybe I'm giving it to you because I see you have like a flashlight. And I think, well, hey, maybe I'll give you the candle and you'll give me the flashlight. Or maybe I don't like you. And I think that smell is like really disgusting actually. and you're gonna have to light it, and it's the same smile, it's the same gesture, but it's coming from a totally different place. And so coming to know our motivation, coming from a more loving motivation or a more compassionate motivation is one thing, and then the second aspect of an action is the skillfulness or the unskillfulness of the execution of it, which is like mindfulness of the bigger picture. It's always contextual. It's always about that moment in time. It's discernment, it's wisdom, it's our best guess of what might be the most skillful way to respond to something in a moment. Maybe there's 50 people in the room, there's only one candle. Maybe this is best done privately. Or the example I use all the time is in speech. Like if you're supervising somebody at work, you learn very quickly. It's not that skillful to say, well, you're an idiot, For one thing, it's not giving them the information they would need should they want to change. It's better to be, more specific. And so we learn skills in speech. And, that's like a whole other thing. And we talk about that actually all the time, because if we conflate those two, the motivation and the execution of the act, then that's the place where people say, I don't know about developing more love. I can only say yes. I can only be meek. I can only smile. I can only give them more money. I can only let them move back in. I can only let them hurt me again. But that's not so. We can be coming from a genuinely loving or compassionate place on our best guess in a moment in time in a certain situation. That is that the most skillful thing is to have a strong boundary, is to say no, is to be fierce, whatever it might be. And so all this takes is a lot of awareness, because it's easy to fool oneself too. But, as best as possible, see what your intention is. As best as possible, see if you're acting as skillfully as you can. And that's really all we can do in the matter of integrity.
I think that's kind of founded on something that really isn't talked about too much. And I think many people even think Buddhism is kind of pessimistic. Life is suffering, life is dukkha. But there's an underlying, wildly optimistic assumption, a truth, that we are whole, that we are Buddha nature, that all we've got to do is pay attention and that will come forth, that we don't have to try to be Buddha nature. We are Buddha nature. So that when I teach compassionate caregiving, conscious caregiving, what I tell people is that you're not learning to help other people. You're learning to be present and be compassionate and aware of what's going on in you. You're not there to help anybody, but the more you're present for yourself, the better helper, the better caregiver you're going to be. Whereas if you're fixated on helping, you're going to be missing your own signals. You're going to be getting lost in conditioning and all kinds of crazy behaviors, probably.
Yeah. Natalie asks, I encounter little glimpses of that feeling of deep love in the universe, and then it goes dim. I keep coming back and starting over, but does anyone get to that place all the time in this world?
Yes.
Anything else?
Well, I know a lot of people who have gone very far down the path. Some people are Tibetan lamas who were chosen at a very young age and were given the best teachers in that whole part of the planet. And I know there was a friend of mine, Suzanne Siegel, who became enlightened standing on a street corner in Paris waiting for a bus, having never meditated before, minding her own business. And boom, it's just the thing happened. And Byron Katie had a awakening experience when a cockroach walked over her foot. So there's all kinds of ways to getting there. There's all kinds of levels of realization. So the Buddha said that only 1 out of 1,000 people really get on the path. And out of 1,000 people around the path, only one gets to the end. So that's 1 out of 1,000,000. I don't know if the odds have changed since the days of the Buddha, whether it's harder now because of iPhones or it's easier now because of their spiritual text on the iPhones. It's kind of hard to know. But it's worrying about being there all the time is just getting in the way. Just be aware of what does get in the way and love that. I mean, the instruction is so simple to be with what is, but again and again we think, this isn't it. I have to judge myself so I can get to it. And very often it's like they say in politics, it's the cover up that gets you in trouble. It's not the initial crime. So be angry, have doubt, have fear, have all these things. But how much can you be intimate? How much you can have that clear awareness, compassionate openness, and this tantric understanding of the intrinsically pure nature of things all at the same time. And then enlightened people have very different presentations. Mahasi Sayadaw was, I'm sure he's a really sweet guy, but in the retreat setting, he was like dry as a stick, right? And some of these other people are like so sweet and loving, and other people are like really aggressive and kind of like Vajra, like cutting through. There's no one way to be free. I mean, I'm not going to be free Ram Dass or free Sharon or free anybody. I can only be free Ram Dev Dale. And I don't even know what my name is. It's confusing. Is it Dale or Ram Dev? That's
Okay, I have to tell you Mahasi Sayadaw's story, who was I don't know how to describe him. By the time we met him, of course, he was much older. He was the patriarch. He was the founder of the particular lineage of meditation or Buddhism that I practice most in. And he was extremely, I don't know how to describe him, except that in Burma, in the meditation hall of his center, there's a wax replica of him, and people would say it was hard to tell the difference. But very serene, but
not Mr. Personality.
Exactly. But when he was a young monk, this is a little technical, but within Buddhist teaching, there are different strengths that are developed, and sometimes sequentially. And the first would be concentration. It's just gathering your attention and settling it so that all that energy and attention that's usually scattered all over the place comes together. So it's very powerful. And then with that foundation, we use that power and that one-pointedness to pay attention, to be with a whole variety of different experiences and watch them come and go. So that's the path of insight. And it's a deepening insight that really frees us. And so there were a lot of doctrinal disputes about how much concentration you'd need before you could just pay attention to all these various things coming and going, and learning more about yourself and developing insights and getting enlightened. And it was very much believed that, in large, it was very much believed that you needed really a huge amount of concentration before you could do a path of insight. It was really only the path of insight that would free you. So that meant that the prospect of liberation was basically in the hands of the monk. Only monks could get enlightened because there were no nuns at that point, and lay people didn't have the time and space to develop that huge amount of concentration that people said you'd need. So Mahasi Sayadaw, a young Mahasi Sayadaw, decided, no, you don't need that much concentration. You need just like a little bit of concentration, and you can then kind of open up your awareness, very much as Dale and Emma said, Ram Dev had us do, in that meditation. And then you could really make progress from there. And that was like heresy. He returned the prospect of liberation to women, to lay people. And I heard that when he was like a young monk, he'd go to some more conservative places like Sri Lanka, and they would throw rocks at him, because he was like the rebel. He was just taking that private ownership and ripping it away and saying, this is for everybody. Anybody can do this. So I said to somebody, it was like realizing your grandmother was a Bolshevik or something like that, because he was so not that way when we met him. And so there, I just had to say that because he could appear like a wax statue, but there was a lot of other dimensionality to him.
Oh, that's a great story. We have about 5 minutes left or so, and we have lots of questions we're not going to get to. One is tips on reattaching to what's left of yourself once you've accompanied a beloved to the dissolution or far edges of the threshold.
Well, I don't think that's something to be worried about. That one goes to the edge, one sees the vastness, and every time you do that, one becomes a bit more addicted to it. One gets the very deeply felt sense that this is reality. This is something that can be totally trusted. And as that begins to fade, and you come back to identifying with who you thought you were a bit more, there's not a problem there. It's not. I mean, there are a few people who get caught there; they can't find their way back. But in my experience, those are people who have some fairly deep-seated personality issues that shouldn't be maybe they need some psychological work before they dive that deeply into spaciousness and getting lost in spaciousness. So I would not, I mean, I'm more like a warrior. Let's go there. Let's see what happens. Maybe I'm not going to come back. In Hasidic Judaism, there are these poets who write about prayer. And in one of the prayers, they say, when you kneel down to pray, be willing to die during that prayer, so that who remains at the end of the prayer is not the guy who started the prayer. That person's dead. And in a way, can we bring that dying into the next moment into a uh, much less global way? It's can we be dying moment to moment to moment into the next experience? To me, that's what being around dying people uh, inspires me to do. And the confession here is I'm not interested in dying. I'm interested in awakening. I'm interested in consciousness. And that being around dying people keeps inspiring me to say, hey, now's the time to do this. Now's the time to wake up. You're not who you think you are. These people aren't who they think they are. There's something much bigger, so much incredibly vaster than the mind can contemplate. That's the message of death, not all the falderall of medicine and insurance. I just had to change my insurance. What a nightmare. Okay, onward.
Sharon, I know you have to go in a few moments, so I want to make sure that people can find you if they'd like. Tell us a little bit about how people can find you.
Well, my website is just sharonsalzberg.com. My schedule is on there in some page. I think it's called calendar. And I have a podcast on this network, actually. Come to think of it, called the Metta Hour, METTA. Metta is the Pali word, Pali being the language of the original Buddhist text for loving kindness. And Jackie said 11 books, much to my surprise.
Lots of ways to connect with you. Well, thank you both so much for being with us all tonight and sharing your wisdom. What about you, Ram Dev? What are ways for people to connect with you?
Well, I also have a podcast channel on this network. It's called Healing at the Edge. And maybe we didn't do that. Maybe that was before we started, but I do have a website, livingdying.org, the Living Dying Project. It's the most complete site on the internet with information about conscious dying. There's stuff by me, Stephen Levine, Joan Halifax, on and on and on. Free, really great material. I have a free every other Saturday morning satsang, 9 to 11 California time, that we're getting up to the limit of how much my email server will allow me to be doing, but there's still some space there. So those are the main ways to connect with me, both about spiritual, meditative stuff, but also end of life grief topics as well.
That's great. And for those of you who don't know, the network they're referring to is the Be Here Now Network. And there's all sorts of amazing podcasts, including these two. And you're able to rewatch this live stream as well as our past fellowship live streams at ramdas.org/events. And know that we have a few more things coming up. The next fellowship virtual meetup where we listen to Ram Dass lectures and then go into breakout rooms and discuss them together. That's coming up December 4th. We also have our women's circles starting on November 15th. And you can sign up for those as well as our BIPOC fellowship at ramdas.org/fellowship. And Sharon, you were part of the Wise Hope retreat, the virtual retreat we did back in August. And that bundle is available for download now. And it also includes Krishna Das and Anne Lamott and Bob Thurman and many others. And that's at ramdas.org/wisehope. And lastly, I just want to take a moment to thank you all. Thank you too for your brilliance and wisdom and sharing it, and for all the amazing people that showed up to tune in tonight, and for the many, many people who are behind the scenes to make this happen, from Mangala and JR to Kelly and Rachel and so many more. So please consider making a financial contribution to the Love, Serve, Remember Foundation so that we can continue to curate the Ram Dass Library, host events like this, and just remain a solid organization into the future, carrying the legacy of Ram Dass and Maharaji and these teachings. So you can donate at ramdass.org/support. So thank you all so much. Many blessings.
Ram.
Ram Ram.